The afternoon sunlight streams through my bedroom window, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor where I've been kneeling for the past 20 minutes. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I'm 58 years old. 3 months ago, I buried my husband Marcus after 23 years of what I thought was a perfect marriage. Today, I'm about to break the one promise he made me swear to keep. In my trembling hand, I hold a small brass key, no bigger than my thumb, that I found yesterday, taped underneath Marcus's jewelry box. For over 2 decades, this key has been hiding just inches away from where I laid my head every night, completely unaware of its existence. The mahogany desk drawer it belongs to sits before me like a silent guardian of secrets, its brass lock gleaming in the afternoon light. "Elena, promise me something," Marcus had said on our 5th wedding anniversary, his voice unusually serious as he installed this beautiful antique desk in our bedroom. "This bottom drawer, don't ever try to open it. It contains business documents, legal papers, things that would only confuse and worry you. Promise me you'll never open it." I had laughed then, wrapping my arms around his neck. "Why would I want to look at boring business papers? I trust you completely, my love." That promise felt so easy to make back then. Marcus handled everything: our finances, our investments, our future. I was the teacher who came home to a perfectly managed household, bills paid on time, retirement accounts that Marcus assured me were growing nicely. I felt protected, cherished, taken care of. I felt lucky to have a husband who shouldered all those complicated responsibilities. But now, kneeling here with this key burning like fire in my palm, I realize how much that promise cost me. Since Marcus's sudden heart attack, I've discovered I know nothing about our real financial situation. I found bank statements with numbers that don't match what I thought we had. I've uncovered credit cards I never knew existed. I've spent sleepless nights trying to piece together a financial puzzle that feels deliberately scattered. Yesterday, while preparing to donate Marcus's belongings, I noticed the felt lining in his jewelry box was loose. When I lifted it, there was this key carefully taped to the bottom with a small piece of paper that simply read, "For Elena, when she's ready." Ready for what? The question has been eating at me for 24 hours. My sister Carmen thinks I should just call a locksmith and move on with my life. My daughter Sophia, calling from her busy life in Seattle, suggests I respect Marcus's wishes and leave the past alone. But sitting here, surrounded by financial confusion and unanswered questions, I can't shake the feeling that this drawer holds more than just boring business documents. My hands are shaking so badly, I can barely grip the key. Part of me still feels like I'm betraying Marcus, even though he's gone. Part of me is terrified of what I might find. But there's another part of me, a part that's been growing stronger these past 3 months, that needs to know the truth about my own life. What I'm about to discover in this drawer won't just change everything I thought I knew about my marriage. It will shatter the very foundation of who I believe myself to be and force me to confront a truth that's been hiding in plain sight for over 20 years. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Before I tell you what was in that drawer, I need you to understand what my life with Marcus looked like from the outside and what I believed it to be from the inside. Because without that context, you might not understand why his betrayal cuts so deep or why I spent 23 years living as half a person without even realizing it. Marcus and I met at a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix in 1999. I was 35, a high school English teacher who had given up on finding love after a series of disappointing relationships. He was 38, confident, successful in commercial real estate, and he had this way of making me feel like the most important person in the room. Our first conversation lasted 4 hours. He listened to me talk about my students, my dreams of writing a novel someday, my fears about growing old alone. He made me feel seen. "Elena," he said that very first night, taking my hand across the table, "you deserve to be taken care of. You've been strong for everyone else your whole life. Let me be strong for you." Those words felt like a lifeline. I had been independent my entire adult life, paying my own bills, making my own decisions, building my own career. The idea of sharing that burden with someone felt like pure luxury. Our courtship was a fairy tale. Marcus would surprise me with weekend trips to Sedona, flowers delivered to my classroom, handwritten notes tucked into my purse. He proposed on the beach in San Diego with a ring that took my breath away. "I want to spend my life making sure you never have to worry about anything again," he whispered as he slipped it onto my finger. After our wedding, Marcus kept that promise in ways that felt beautiful and romantic. Every morning for 23 years, he brought me coffee in bed, perfectly prepared with cream and one sugar, served in the delicate china cup his grandmother had given us. He handled every bill, every investment decision, every insurance renewal. When tax season came around, he would simply hand me forms to sign. "Just your signature, treasure," he'd say with a kiss on my forehead. "I've got everything else handled." He called me treasure every single day. In the grocery store, at dinner parties, even during our few arguments. "Come on, treasure. You know I only want what's best for us." The pet name made me feel precious, protected, valued beyond measure. I threw myself into being the perfect wife and stepmother to Sophia, Marcus' daughter from his first marriage. I organized our social calendar, maintained our beautiful home, and continued teaching because Marcus said my passion for education made him proud. We took romantic vacations to Europe, hosted elegant dinner parties, and attended charity galas where Marcus would introduce me as his better half while his arm wrapped protectively around my waist. From the outside, we were the couple everyone envied. Friends would comment on how attentive Marcus was, how lucky I was to have found a man who treated me like a queen. "He never makes you worry about money or business," my friend Janet would say wistfully. "Tom expects me to handle half of everything. You've got it made, Elena." I believed them. I believed I had won the marriage lottery. Our bedroom became a sanctuary of that perfect life. Family photos lined the dresser. Sophia's graduation, our anniversary trips, holidays with my sister Carmen. The mahogany desk fit seamlessly into our decor. Its locked drawer was just another piece of furniture that I never questioned. It held Marcus's boring business papers, and I was grateful not to be burdened with such tedious details. I was living in a beautiful cage, and I had no idea the door was locked from the outside. The key slides into the lock with a soft click. It was April 2005, about 5 years into our marriage, when the first crack appeared in my perfect world. At the time, it seemed so small, so insignificant that I almost missed it entirely. Looking back now, I realize it was the moment everything began to unravel. I just didn't know it yet. Marcus was in Denver for what he said was a 3-day commercial real estate conference. I was home grading papers when our accountant, Robert Chen, called about preparing our tax returns. We'd been working with Robert for 2 years, and he was always thorough and professional. "Elena, I'm missing some documentation for Marcus rental properties," Robert said. "Could you check his files for the depreciation schedules from last year? I need them before I can finish your returns." "Of course," I replied, setting down my red pen. Where would Marcus keep those kinds of documents? There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well, usually in his home office files." "Have you checked the desk in your bedroom?" "Most of my clients keep their important property documents there." I felt a flutter of uncertainty. "Actually, Robert, that desk has a locked drawer. Marcus keeps his business papers there, but I don't have access to it." The silence stretched longer this time. When Robert spoke again, his voice carried a note of confusion I'd never heard before.
"I'm sorry, Elena."
"Did you say you don't have access to your own financial documents?" Heat crept up my neck. "Well, it's not that I can't have access. It's just that Marcus handles all the business matters. He says I don't need to worry about those complicated details." "But these are joint tax returns," Robert said slowly. "The rental properties are listed under both your names. You're legally responsible for the accuracy of these documents." Something cold settled in my stomach. "Both our names?" "Yes, Elena. You're listed as co-owner on 3 rental properties. Has Marcus not discussed these investments with you?" I stood in our bedroom, staring at that mahogany desk, as if seeing it for the first time. The locked drawer suddenly felt less like a piece of furniture and more like a barrier. "I'll have Marcus call you when he gets back from Denver." That evening, I called Marcus at his hotel. He answered on the first ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Hey there, treasure. Missing me already?" "Marcus?" Robert called about our taxes. He mentioned some rental properties that apparently have my name on them. The warmth vanished from his voice instantly. "What exactly did Robert tell you?" "Just that he needs some documents from your desk drawer and that I'm listed as a co-owner on some properties." I had no idea we owned rental properties. Marcus' laugh sounded forced. "Elena, sweetheart, you know how accountants are. They make everything sound more complicated than it is. Yes, for tax purposes, your name is on some paperwork, but you don't need to worry about any of that." "But Robert said I'm legally responsible, Elena." Marcus' voice carried an edge I'd rarely heard before. "When I get home, we'll sit down and I'll explain everything you need to know. But right now, I need you to promise me something important. Don't go through that desk drawer. Some of those documents are confidential business matters that could cause problems if they're not handled properly. Promise me you'll wait for me to get home." The intensity in his voice made my hands tremble. "Of course, Marcus, I wasn't going to promise. Me, Elena. This is important. I promise." But as I hung up the phone, I realized something had shifted. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like Marcus was hiding something from me. And for the first time, that locked drawer felt less like protection and more like a secret. My heart pounds as I take a deep breath and turn it. After that phone call with Robert, something fundamental shifted in my marriage. Though it happened so gradually, I barely noticed at first. It was like watching paint fade, imperceptible day by day, but devastating when you finally stepped back to see the full picture. Marcus returned from Denver with flowers and my favorite chocolates, his usual charming smile firmly in place. He sat me down at our kitchen table and spread out a few documents, just enough to make me feel included without actually showing me anything meaningful. "See, treasure, just boring rental property paperwork," he said, pointing to sheets covered in numbers that meant nothing to me. "3 small properties that help with our retirement planning." Robert was being overly cautious about the documentation. I nodded, accepting his explanation because I wanted to believe him. But something had changed in how he looked at me during that conversation, like he was measuring my responses, calculating how much I would accept without questioning further. Over the following months, Marcus began treating me like I was made of glass, fragile and incapable of handling adult responsibilities. When bills arrived in the mail, he would intercept them before I could even see the return addresses. "Don't worry about these, Elena. Just junk mail and business stuff." Phone calls became secretive affairs. Marcus would step outside to take calls from his business partner or disappear into his home office, with the door closed. When I asked about his day over dinner, his answers became vague and dismissive. Just the usual property management headaches. Nothing that would interest you. The worst part was how he began speaking about me to others. At dinner parties, when conversations turned to finances or investments, Marcus would chuckle and pat my hand condescendingly. "Elena is the creative one in our family. She leaves all the number crunching to me." When our friends discussed retirement planning or market fluctuations, he would speak for both of us. "We're very conservative with our investments. Elena prefers the peace of mind of knowing I handle all those details." I started to feel invisible in my own life. At the bank, tellers would automatically hand documents to Marcus, even when I was standing right beside him. When we met with our insurance agent, Marcus would answer questions I was perfectly capable of addressing myself. "Elena doesn't need to worry about the coverage details," he'd say. "That's why she has me." The erosion was so subtle that I began to doubt my own capabilities. When Sophia called to tell us about buying her first house, I instinctively handed the phone to Marcus when she mentioned mortgage rates and down payments. "Your dad knows all about that stuff," I said, even though I had successfully managed my own finances for 15 years before marriage. I stopped reading the financial section of the newspaper. I stopped asking questions about our retirement accounts. I stopped feeling entitled to know basic information about my own financial life. Marcus had trained me so well that I began to police myself, dismissing my own curiosity as unnecessary and burdensome. The morning coffee ritual continued, and Marcus still called me treasure. But now those gestures felt different, less like expressions of love and more like consolation prizes for my compliance. He would kiss my forehead and say things like, "You're so lucky you don't have to worry about all the complicated stuff I deal with every day." Lucky, as if ignorance was a gift instead of imprisonment. By our 10th anniversary, I had become a stranger to myself, a woman who had forgotten she was once capable of reading a bank statement, understanding an investment portfolio, or making financial decisions. I had traded my independence for the illusion of security. And I didn't even realize how much of myself I had lost in the transaction. The locked drawer wasn't just hiding Marcus' secrets anymore. It was hiding mine, too. The moment that broke something irreparable inside me happened on our 20th wedding anniversary in front of 50 of our closest friends and family members. It was supposed to be a celebration of our enduring love. But instead, it became the night I realized how completely Marcus had erased me from my own life. We had rented the private dining room at Villa Rosa, our favorite Italian restaurant, the same place where Marcus had proposed 15 years earlier. I wore a midnight blue dress that made me feel elegant and confident. For weeks, I had been planning every detail: the flowers, the menu, the photo slideshow of our life together. Marcus kept telling everyone how lucky he was to have a wife who handled all the party planning details so beautifully. The evening started perfectly. Carmen gave a touching toast about how Marcus and I proved that true love existed. Sophia flew in from Seattle and told everyone how grateful she was for the stable home I had helped create. I felt radiant, surrounded by people who loved us, celebrating what I believed was a partnership built on mutual respect and deep affection. But then I overheard a conversation that shattered everything. I was returning from the restroom when I heard Marcus's voice carrying from the small alcove near the kitchen. He was talking to his business partner, Richard, and our neighbor, Tom. They had been drinking, and their voices were louder than they realized. 20 years, Marcus, Richard was saying. How do you keep a woman happy for that long without her getting all involved in your business? Marcus's laugh made my blood run cold. It's simple, really. You just have to manage their expectations from the beginning. Women like Elena, they want to feel taken care of, not burdened with complicated decisions. But doesn't she ask questions? Tom pressed. Sarah's always wanting to know about our investments, our retirement plans. Drives me crazy. That's your mistake, Marcus replied, his voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before, cold and calculating. You let Sarah think she was entitled to equal partnership. I established early on that Elena's strengths are in other areas. She's brilliant with her students, amazing at making our home beautiful, but honestly, she just doesn't have the mind for financial matters. She gets overwhelmed by numbers, confused by legal documents. It's actually kinder to handle all that for her. Richard chuckled. So, she has no idea what you're really worth. None whatsoever. And she's perfectly happy that way. Elena trusts me completely, never questions my decisions, never demands to see statements or contracts. I keep enough in our joint checking account for her to feel secure, and she never thinks to ask about the rest. It's the perfect arrangement. What if something happened to you?
Tom asked.
Marcus's voice became dismissive. I've got everything set up, so Elena would be taken care of. She'd never need to understand the complicated stuff. There are people who can manage all that for her. I stood frozen in the hallway, my anniversary dress suddenly feeling like a costume I was wearing in a play I didn't know I was performing in. These men, including my husband, were talking about me like I was a child or a pet who needed to be managed rather than a partner who deserved respect. The worst part wasn't just what Marcus said. It was how he said it with the casual confidence of a man who had successfully trained his wife to be grateful for her own ignorance. He spoke about my trust like it was a tool he had crafted, my contentment like it was a prison he had built so skillfully that I had thanked him for the bars. When I rejoined the party, everyone smiled and continued celebrating our perfect marriage. Marcus wrapped his arm around my waist and called me his treasure while making another toast about how blessed we were to have found each other. But I wasn't his treasure. I was his secret, kept locked away just like that drawer in our bedroom. The call came at 2:47 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in March. I was grading essays in the faculty lounge when my phone rang, and the number on the screen belonged to Phoenix General Hospital. The voice on the other end was calm and professional, but the words felt like they were coming from underwater. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Dr. Sarah Kim. Your husband, Marcus, was brought to our emergency department about an hour ago. He suffered what appears to be a massive heart attack at his office. I need you to come to the hospital immediately. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of traffic lights and half-formed prayers. I kept thinking about our morning routine. Marcus bringing me coffee in bed, kissing my forehead, telling me he had an important client meeting but would be home for dinner. "Love you, treasure," he had said, the same words he'd spoken every morning for 23 years. By the time I reached the cardiac unit, it was too late. Dr. Kim met me in the hallway with gentle eyes and devastating news. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm so sorry. We did everything we could, but the damage to his heart was too extensive. He passed away about 20 minutes ago." The funeral was a blur of casseroles, condolence cards, and well-meaning friends who kept telling me how well provided for I would be. "Marcus was such a smart businessman," they said. "I'm sure he left you completely taken care of." I nodded and smiled and played the part of the grateful widow who trusted her husband's careful planning. But in the weeks that followed, as I sat in our bedroom, surrounded by sympathy flowers and legal documents I couldn't understand, the truth began to emerge. Marcus had indeed taken care of me by leaving me completely unprepared for life without him. The checking account I had access to contained $8,000. Our mortgage payment was $12,800 a month. I found credit card statements for accounts I never knew existed, with balances that made my head spin. When I called the bank to ask about our savings, they told me most of our accounts required passwords I didn't know, and some had been flagged for estate processing with lawyers whose names were unfamiliar to me. "I don't understand," I told the bank representative, my voice cracking with frustration. "I'm his wife. Surely I have access to our accounts." "Ma'am, your name isn't on most of these accounts. You'll need to work with the estate attorney to determine what assets you're entitled to." Entitled to in my own marriage? The words felt like a slap. Sophia called from Seattle, her voice tight with her own grief and the pressure of her demanding job. "Mom, I can help you figure out Dad's finances, but I can't take time off right now. This project I'm managing could make or break my career. Can you just gather all the documents and we'll go through them when I visit next month?" Carmen offered to help, but she lived 2 hours away and had her own family responsibilities. "Elena, honey, maybe you should just sell the house and move into something smaller. Start fresh." You know, Marcus probably kept things more complicated than they needed to be. But this house was my home. This bedroom, with its morning coffee ritual and framed family photos, held 23 years of my life. And that mahogany desk with its locked drawer sat there like a silent accusation, reminding me every day of how little I knew about my own existence. I felt utterly abandoned, not just by Marcus's death, but by the realization that he had left me deliberately helpless. He had protected me right into a corner, loved me into ignorance, cherished me into complete dependency. Sitting on our bedroom floor at midnight, still in my black funeral dress, I stared at that locked drawer and whispered the truth I was finally ready to face. "I don't know who I am without you telling me." 2 months after Marcus's funeral, I hit a wall that nearly destroyed me completely. It was a Thursday morning in May, and I was sitting on our bedroom floor in my pajamas at 11 o'clock, surrounded by a sea of papers that might as well have been written in a foreign language. The morning coffee ritual had died with Marcus. I couldn't bring myself to use that delicate china cup anymore. It felt like a mockery of everything I thought our marriage had been. Instead, I drank instant coffee from a chipped mug while trying to make sense of documents that seemed designed to confuse me. Bills kept arriving in Marcus's name: property management fees, insurance premiums, tax notices for properties I didn't know we owned. Each envelope felt like another secret he had kept from me, another way he had failed to prepare me for this moment. The stack of unpaid bills on my nightstand had grown into a small mountain of my own inadequacy. My weight had dropped to 118 pounds, the lowest it had been since college. Food had lost all taste and meaning. I would stand in our kitchen, The kitchen where Marcus used to kiss my forehead every morning and forget why I had gone there. The refrigerator was nearly empty, except for a carton of milk that had expired a week ago and some wilted flowers Sophia had sent that I couldn't bring myself to throw away. Sleep had become my enemy. Every night, I would lie in our king-sized bed, taking up the same small corner I had occupied for 23 years, staring at that mahogany desk in the moonlight. The locked drawer seemed to mock me with its silence. What kind of wife doesn't know her own family's financial situation? What kind of woman trusts so completely that she becomes helpless? The isolation was suffocating. My teacher friends had been supportive immediately after the funeral, but life had moved on for them, while mine remained frozen in confusion and grief. When they called to check on me, I found myself lying about how I was doing because I was too ashamed to admit that I couldn't figure out how to pay my own bills. "I'm managing fine," I would tell them, while staring at a foreclosure notice that had arrived that morning for a property I didn't even know existed. Sophia called every Sunday, but our conversations had become strained and brief. She was dealing with her own grief while managing a critical project at work, and I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. When she asked about my finances, I gave her vague reassurances because I couldn't bear to admit that her father had left me so utterly unprepared. "Dad always said you were taken care of, Mom," she said during one particularly difficult call. "Are you sure you're looking in the right places for the documents?" The right places? As if there was some obvious location where Marcus had left a roadmap for me to follow. The only place I hadn't looked was that locked drawer, and even in my desperation, I couldn't bring myself to break my promise to him. Carmen visited on a Saturday and found me still in my pajamas at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, crying over a stack of bank statements that showed accounts with zero balances. "Elena, honey, you can't go on like this," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You're wasting away. You need to get professional help. Maybe hire a financial advisor or an attorney." "With what money?" I whispered, the words scraping out of my throat like broken glass. "I don't even know what we have or where it is. I feel like such a failure, Carmen. What kind of wife was I that my own husband didn't trust me to know about our life?" That night, alone again in our bedroom, I reached my absolute lowest point. I knelt beside the mahogany desk and actually considered taking a hammer to that locked drawer. But even in my desperation, I couldn't break the last promise I had made to the man I loved. I was drowning in my own home, suffocating on 23 years of willful ignorance, and I had no idea how to save myself. It was a Tuesday morning in late June when desperation finally overcame loyalty. I had just received another call from the bank about an overdue mortgage payment on a property I didn't know we owned, and I was at the end of my rope. 3 months of living in financial limbo had pushed me to a breaking point I never thought I'd reach. I decided to donate Marcus's belongings to charity. Not because I was ready to let go, but because I needed the space in our bedroom to spread out all the confusing paperwork. Maybe if I could organize everything on the floor, some pattern would emerge that would help me understand our financial situation. I started with his dresser, methodically folding his sweaters and dress shirts into donation boxes. Each piece of clothing carried his scent, his memory, and I had to stop several times to wipe away tears. This felt like erasing him from our home. But I was drowning and needed to do something. Anything that felt like progress. When I opened his jewelry box to pack his watches and cufflinks, my hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the entire thing. That's when I noticed something I had never seen before. Despite having lived with this jewelry box for over 20 years, the burgundy felt lining in the bottom seemed loose, with one corner slightly raised. My heart started pounding as I gently lifted the felt. Underneath, taped to the wooden bottom with yellowing Scotch tape, was a small brass key, no bigger than my thumb, attached to a folded piece of Marcus's personal stationery. With trembling fingers, I unfolded the note. In Marcus's careful handwriting, it read, "For Elena, when she's ready. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you while I was alive. You're stronger than I ever let you believe." I stared at those words until they blurred through my tears. When she's ready. Ready for what? And what did he mean about not being brave enough? Brave enough for what? The key was warm in my palm, as if it had been waiting for this moment. I looked across the room at the mahogany desk, at that bottom drawer that had been forbidden territory for our entire marriage. My promise to never open it had been sacred to me, even after his death. But this note suggested Marcus himself had intended for me to find this key eventually. "You're stronger than I ever let you believe." Those words hit me like a physical blow. What did Marcus know about my strength that he had hidden from me? What had he kept locked away that required strength to face? I walked to the desk on unsteady legs, the key growing heavier with each step. Part of me was terrified of what I might find. Part of me was angry that, even in death, Marcus was still controlling the timing of my discoveries. But there was another part of me, a part that had been growing stronger during these 3 months of struggle, that needed to know the truth about my own life. I knelt beside the desk, my hands shaking so violently I could barely fit the key into the lock. "I'm sorry, Marcus," I whispered to the empty room, "but I can't live in the dark anymore." The key turned with a soft click that seemed to echo through the silence of our bedroom. For a moment, I just stared at the drawer, my hand frozen on the small brass handle. Whatever was inside had been deemed too dangerous, too complicated, too overwhelming for me to handle while Marcus was alive. But Marcus was wrong about one thing. I wasn't opening this drawer because I was strong. I was opening this drawer because I was desperate, confused, and tired of being treated like a child in my own life. I took a deep breath and pulled the drawer open. What I found inside didn't just change everything I thought I knew about our marriage. It revealed a truth that would transform my understanding of myself forever. The silence in our bedroom was deafening as I stared into that open drawer, my mind struggling to process what lay before me. 3 thick manila folders sat neatly arranged, each labeled in Marcus' meticulous handwriting: investment accounts, property holdings, and Elena's file. My hands were still trembling as I reached for the first folder. Inside were bank statements and investment account summaries dating back 15 years. Accounts I had never heard of, with balances that made my breath catch in my throat. Our checking account, which I thought contained our life savings, held $8,000. But these statements showed investment accounts worth over $400,000, money market funds with 6-figure balances, and retirement accounts that were fully funded and growing. We weren't struggling financially. We were wealthy. The second folder contained property deeds and rental agreements for 4 properties, not the 3 that Robert had mentioned years ago. We owned 2 rental houses in Scottsdale, a small apartment building in Tempe, and a vacation condo in Sedona that generated monthly income one never knew existed. Every mortgage was paid in full. Every property was appreciating in value. The rental income alone was more than my teaching salary. But it was the third folder, Elena's file, that broke something fundamental inside me and rebuilt it into something entirely different. Inside were copies of letters Marcus had written to our financial advisor, Mr. David Walsh, spanning nearly 2 decades. Letters that discussed our financial strategy as if I were a child who needed to be managed rather than a partner who deserved transparency. One letter from 2010 read, "Elena continues to be happiest when she doesn't have to worry about investment decisions. Please maintain the separate statements for the accounts she doesn't need to know about. She trusts me completely to handle our financial future, and I see no reason to burden her with these complexities." Another from 2015 stated, "Elena asked some questions about our retirement planning after talking to her sister. I've reassured her that everything is well in hand. Please continue sending the detailed statements only to my office address. The simplified monthly summaries for our joint checking account are sufficient for her needs." But the letter that shattered me completely was dated just 6 months before Marcus' death. It read, "I've been thinking about what would happen to Elena if something happened to me. She spent so many years trusting me to handle everything that I'm worried she wouldn't know how to manage these assets. But it's too late to change our dynamic now. She's comfortable in her role, and disrupting that would only create anxiety for both of us. I've set up a trust that will ensure she's taken care of without having to understand the complicated details. Taken care of like a pet or a child." At the very bottom of the folder was a letter addressed to me in an envelope that had never been opened. With shaking hands, I tore it open and read Marcus's final communication to me. My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you found the courage to open this drawer. I've spent our entire marriage protecting you from financial stress. But I realize now that I was really protecting myself from having to share control. You are far more capable than I ever allowed you to be. I was afraid that if you knew how much we were truly worth, you might realize you didn't need me as much as I needed you to need me. I'm sorry for keeping you in the dark. I'm sorry for making you feel helpless when you've never been anything but strong. The enclosed key opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Everything you need to take control of your life is there. You don't need anyone to take care of you, Elena. You never did. Forever yours, Marcus. I sat on our bedroom floor, surrounded by evidence of a 23-year deception. And for the first time since Marcus died, I wasn't sad or confused or afraid. I was angry, and that anger was waking up parts of myself I had forgotten existed. The safety deposit box key felt like a burning coal in my hand as I walked into First National Bank the next morning. I had spent the entire night reading and rereading those financial statements, calculating numbers that should have been familiar to me but felt foreign after years of deliberate ignorance. I hadn't slept, but for the first time in months, my mind felt razor-sharp and focused. The bank manager, Mrs. Patricia Valdez, led me to the vault with sympathetic efficiency. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Rodriguez. Mr. Marcus was always so meticulous about his banking arrangements." "Apparently so," I replied, my voice steadier than it had been in months. Inside the safety deposit box was a treasure trove of documents that painted a complete picture of the financial empire Marcus had built while keeping me in the dark. Detailed investment portfolios, insurance policies, property management contracts, and a comprehensive net worth statement that showed we were worth nearly $1.2 million. But more importantly, there was a manila envelope marked Elena's Financial Education, containing simplified explanations of every investment, every property, and every account written in Marcus's handwriting, as if he had been preparing to teach me but never found the courage to begin. I spent the entire morning in that small, windowless room, methodically reading every document. By the time I emerged, I had a complete understanding of our financial situation and a plan forming in my mind. But I told no one. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in 23 years. I made financial decisions independently. I called Mr. David Walsh, our financial advisor, and scheduled a meeting without mentioning Marcus's death or asking for permission from anyone. "Mrs. Rodriguez," David said when I arrived at his office that Thursday afternoon, "I have to say, I'm surprised to hear from you directly. Marcus always handled our communications." "Marcus is dead," I said simply, placing the safety deposit box key on his desk. "And I'm very much alive. I'd like to discuss our portfolio." David's face shifted from surprise to something that looked like respect. Over the next 2 hours, he walked me through every investment decision Marcus had made, every property acquisition, and every financial strategy. He answered my questions with patience and thoroughness, and I realized something profound. I understood everything he was telling me. "Marcus always said you preferred not to be involved in these details," David mentioned carefully. "Marcus said a lot of things," I replied. It turns out he was wrong about most of them. That afternoon, I opened my own checking account and had the rental property income redirected to it. I called the property management company and introduced myself as the new primary contact. I reviewed our insurance policies and updated all the beneficiary information. Most importantly, I began educating myself. I checked out books on investing from the library. I subscribed to financial magazines. I started watching YouTube videos about real estate investment and portfolio management. Every evening, I would sit at that mahogany desk, all drawers now open, and study financial concepts that Marcus had convinced me were too complicated for my creative mind. The most liberating discovery was how much I enjoyed it. Numbers made sense to me. Investment strategies were logical puzzles I could solve. Real estate decisions required the same analytical thinking I used to plan my lesson curricula. Marcus hadn't protected me from finance because I was incapable. He had excluded me because I was entirely capable and my competence threatened his control. Sophia called during my second week of financial independence. Mom, how are you managing? Do you need me to come help with Dad's estate? Actually, sweetheart, I said, looking at my new investment research spread across the desk. I have everything well in hand. Your father left very detailed records, and I'm learning to manage our assets quite effectively. Our assets? Sophia sounded surprised. My assets. I corrected gently. And I'm discovering I have a talent for this that your father never let me explore. By August, 3 months after discovering the truth about our finances, I had quietly become someone Marcus never would have recognized. A woman who made financial decisions with confidence and clarity. The transformation was happening so gradually that even I was surprised by how natural it felt to be in control of my own life. The first sign that power was shifting came during a routine call from Richard, Marcus's former business partner. He had been trying to reach me for weeks about some complicated business matters that required my signature, assuming I would need his guidance to navigate Marcus's estate. Elena, sweetheart, Richard said in that patronizing tone I was beginning to despise. I know this is all overwhelming for you. Why don't I come over this weekend and help you sort through Marcus's business affairs? There are some investment opportunities that require immediate attention, and I know Marcus would want me to look after you. That's very kind, Richard, I replied, my voice calm and steady. But I've already reviewed all of Marcus's investments with our financial advisor. Everything is properly managed and performing well. I won't need your assistance. There was a long pause. Elena, are you sure you understand what you're looking at? Some of these investments are quite complex. Marcus always said. Marcus said many things. I interrupted smoothly. But I'm handling our portfolio now, and I'm quite comfortable with the complexity. Thank you for your concern. After I hung up, I realized something had shifted in my voice. A quiet authority that hadn't been there before. I wasn't asking permission or seeking validation. I was simply stating facts. The real test came when our insurance agent, Tom Morrison, called about renewing our policies. Tom had worked with Marcus for 15 years and had grown accustomed to dealing exclusively with him, even when I was sitting right there during meetings. Mrs. Rodriguez, I've prepared the renewal documents exactly as Marcus always preferred them. I'll just need your signature, and we'll keep everything the same for another year. Actually, Tom, I've been reviewing our coverage and I'd like to make some changes, I said, pulling out my carefully prepared notes. I want to increase the liability coverage on our rental properties and adjust the deductibles on our homeowner's policy. I've also researched term life insurance and want to add a policy for myself.
Oh.
Tom sounded genuinely confused. Well, Mrs. Rodriguez, these are significant changes. Are you sure you want to make decisions this important without consulting someone? Perhaps Richard could advise you. Tom, I said, my voice taking on an edge I didn't know I possessed. I am consulting someone. I'm consulting myself. I've spent the last 3 months educating myself about our financial situation, and I'm perfectly capable of making informed decisions about our insurance needs. Of course, Tom backtracked quickly. It's just that Marcus always, well, he had very specific preferences about how he wanted things handled. Marcus is dead, I said simply.
I'm alive.
I'm the policyholder, and these are my preferences. Can you help me with these changes, or should I find an agent who can? Within an hour, Tom had prepared the revised policies exactly as I requested. Word began to spread through our social circle that Elena Rodriguez was no longer the helpless widow everyone expected her to be. At the grocery store, bank, and even at church, people started looking at me differently. Instead of the pitying glances I had grown accustomed to, I began seeing something that looked suspiciously like respect. Carmen noticed the change immediately when she called that Friday. Elena, you sound different, she said. Stronger. More like the sister I knew before you got married. I'm remembering who I used to be, I replied, surprising myself with the truth of those words. It turns out I'm much more capable than I gave myself credit for. Marcus really did a number on you, didn't he? Yes, I said quietly, but I'm undoing it one decision at a time. The moment I had been unconsciously preparing for arrived on a crisp Saturday morning in September. I had invited Carmen over for coffee, but this wasn't just a sisterly visit. After 3 months of silent transformation, I was ready to speak my truth aloud to someone who had known me before Marcus convinced me I was helpless. Carmen arrived at 10 o'clock sharp, carrying a box of pastries from our favorite bakery. She looked around our kitchen with the gentle concern she'd worn since Marcus's funeral, clearly prepared to continue managing my fragile emotional state. "How are you holding up, honey?" she asked, settling into her usual chair at our breakfast table. "I brought those almond croissants you love. You need to keep your strength up." "Actually, Carmen, I'm doing better than I have in years," I said, placing 2 china cups on the table. Not the delicate set Marcus had chosen for me, but sturdy mugs I had bought for myself the week before. "I have something to show you." I returned from the bedroom, carrying the 3 manila folders from Marcus's drawer, setting them on the table between us like evidence in a trial. Carmen's eyebrows rose as she noticed the neat organization, the highlighted sections, the handwritten notes, and my own careful script. "What's all this?" she asked. "This is my marriage," I said simply. "The real one, not the fairy tale version everyone saw." I opened the first folder and began walking Carmen through the financial statements, the property deeds, the investment accounts. Her face shifted from confusion to surprise to anger as the full scope of Marcus's deception became clear. "Elena," she said slowly, "you're telling me that while you were worrying about paying the mortgage, you actually owned 4 properties and had over $1 million in assets?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," I replied, my voice steady and calm. "But it gets worse." I showed her Marcus's letters to the financial advisor, reading some of the more devastating passages aloud. Carmen's face grew darker with each revelation. "This one is my favorite," I said, pulling out a letter from 2018. Marcus writes, "Elena mentioned wanting to return to school for her master's degree, but the tuition would strain our budget. I've convinced her to postpone this dream indefinitely. She doesn't realize we could easily afford it. I just don't want her getting too independent with additional education." Carmen slammed her hand on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. "That bastard. Elena, you talked about getting your master's for years. He made you feel selfish for even wanting it." "He did more than that," I said, pulling out the final letter, the one addressed to me. "He made me believe I was lucky to be so well taken care of, when really I was being systematically diminished." I read Marcus's final letter aloud, my voice never wavering. When I finished, Carmen was crying, but I wasn't. I was beyond tears now, in a place of crystal clear understanding. "Carmen, I need you to understand something," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I'm not telling you this because I need comfort or sympathy. I'm telling you because I want you to see who I really am, who you really are. I'm not the helpless widow everyone expects me to be. I'm not the woman who needs her family to manage her life. I've spent the last 3 months learning to handle complex financial portfolios, negotiate with property managers, and make investment decisions. And you know what I discovered?" Carmen waited, her eyes wide. "I'm actually good at this. Really good." Marcus didn't protect me from financial stress. He robbed me of 23 years of financial growth and independence. But that ends now. I closed the folders and looked directly into my sister's eyes. "I don't need anyone to take care of me, Carmen. I never did." Just when I thought I had uncovered all of Marcus' secrets, the universe delivered one final revelation that would transform everything I understood about justice, forgiveness, and the strange ways love can persist, even through betrayal. It happened 3 weeks after my conversation with Carmen. While I was organizing the very last section of the safety deposit box, hidden behind a manila envelope containing our original marriage certificate was a sealed letter I had somehow missed during my initial discovery. Unlike the other documents, this envelope was thick, heavy, and marked with a date from just 2 months before Marcus's death. Inside was a life insurance policy I never knew existed, a $500,000 term life policy with me as the sole beneficiary, purchased secretly and maintained for over 15 years. But more shocking than the policy itself was the letter that accompanied it, written in Marcus' increasingly shaky handwriting as his health began to fail. "My dearest Elena," it began. "If you're reading this, you found the courage to open that drawer and discovered what a coward I've been my entire marriage. By now you know about the money, the properties, the deliberate way I kept you dependent on me. You probably hate me, and you have every right to. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot, hands trembling as I continued reading. I need you to know that every decision I made to control our finances came from my own fear, not from any belief that you are incapable. The truth is, Elena, you were always smarter than me, more intuitive, more naturally gifted at understanding people and situations. I was terrified that if you knew how capable you were, you would realize you deserved better than me. The letter went on to detail specific instances where Marcus had deliberately undermined my confidence, discouraging me from pursuing my master's degree, not because we couldn't afford it, but because he was afraid I would outgrow him, preventing me from attending investment seminars not because they were too complicated, but because he knew I would excel at financial planning. I convinced myself I was protecting you, he wrote. But I was really protecting my own ego. I needed you to need me, Elena, because I was so afraid of losing you. But by keeping you small, I lost the most important parts of who you really are. The most devastating part came near the end. I tried to tell you the truth so many times. I would practice conversations in my office, rehearsing how to explain everything. But every time I came home and saw how content you seemed in the life I had created for us, I lost my nerve. I told myself you were happy, but the truth is I was terrified of facing your anger and disappointment. But it was the final paragraph that brought tears to my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of something more complex, a mixture of grief and liberation. This life insurance policy is my attempt at justice. Though I know it can never undo the damage I've done, I want you to use this money not just to live comfortably, but to become the woman you were meant to be before I convinced you to be smaller. Take those graduate courses. Travel alone. Start that nonprofit you dreamed about. Make decisions without asking anyone's permission. The Elena I fell in love with was fearless and independent. Help her remember how to fly. I sat in that parking lot for an hour, processing the strange gift Marcus had left me. Even in death, he was still controlling the narrative, still managing my emotions through carefully orchestrated revelations. But this time, his manipulation had an unexpected effect. Instead of feeling managed, I felt vindicated. Marcus himself had confirmed what I was beginning to understand. I had never been the helpless woman he convinced me I was. His final act wasn't one of protection. It was an admission of guilt and a plea for forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. The money would be substantial, yes, but more importantly, his words had given me something I didn't know I needed: permission to stop feeling guilty for being angry about the life he had stolen from me. Sophia's call came on a Thursday evening in late October, just as I was finishing a webinar on real estate investment strategies that I'd been attending weekly since September. Her voice carried a tone I hadn't heard in months. Urgent, almost panicked. "Mom, I need to come home this weekend," she said without preamble. "I've been talking to Aunt Carmen, and she told me about what you found in Dad's papers. I had no idea about any of this. I feel terrible that I haven't been more supportive." "Sophia, sweetheart, you don't need to." "No, Mom, I do need to. I've been so wrapped up in my own grief and this stupid promotion that I basically abandoned you. Carmen said you've been handling everything alone, learning about investments and managing properties. I should have been there to help you figure all that out." The old Elena would have immediately reassured Sophia that everything was fine, that she didn't need any help, that her daughter shouldn't feel guilty for prioritizing her career. But the woman I was becoming had different words ready. "I'd love to see you, Sophia, but I want you to understand something before you come," I said, closing my laptop where I'd been taking notes on cap rates and cash flow analysis. "I don't need you to take care of me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Of course you don't, Mom. I just meant I could help you understand some of the financial stuff. Maybe help you make decisions about what to do with Dad's investments." "My investments," I corrected gently, "and I've already made most of the decisions I needed to make." Sophia arrived on Saturday morning with her laptop, a stack of financial planning books, and the same well-meaning but patronizing energy that had surrounded me since Marcus's death. She hugged me tightly at the door, and I could see the guilt and concern in her eyes. "Mom, you look wonderful," she said, seeming genuinely surprised. Carmen said you'd been struggling, but you seem so composed. I am composed, I said, leading her to the kitchen where I'd prepared coffee in my new sturdy mugs instead of the delicate china set. I've had 4 months to figure things out, and it turns out I'm quite good at it. Sophia opened her laptop and pulled out a notebook. Okay, so I've been researching financial advisors and estate planning attorneys. I think the first thing we need to do is get a comprehensive picture of what Dad left you, and then we can make a plan for... Sophia, I interrupted, placing my hand gently over hers. I appreciate that you want to help, but I already have a comprehensive picture. I've been working with Dad's financial advisor since June. I've reorganized the investment portfolio, increased our rental property income by 15%, and I'm considering purchasing another property in Flagstaff. My daughter stared at me as if I just announced I was joining the circus. You're what, Mom? Are you sure you understand what you're doing? These kinds of decisions are really complex. I felt a familiar flutter of the old insecurity, the voice that whispered, maybe Sophia was right. Maybe I was getting in over my head. But then I thought about the webinar I'd just completed, the successful property management decisions I'd made, the growing confidence I felt every time I reviewed our monthly statements. Sophia, I love you deeply, and I'm grateful that you want to help, I said, my voice calm but firm. But I spent 23 years having people tell me I couldn't understand complex things.
Your father was wrong about that.
And with all due respect, so are you. Sophia's mouth opened slightly, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. I'm not the helpless widow you came home to rescue, I continued. I'm an intelligent woman who's finally been allowed to use her intelligence. I don't need you to take care of me. I need you to respect that I'm capable of taking care of myself. 6 months after opening that forbidden drawer, I sit in the same bedroom where my transformation began. But everything has changed, including me. The mahogany desk remains in its place by the window. But now all its drawers are open, organized with my own financial documents, investment research, and plans for the future I'm building entirely on my own terms. This morning, instead of Marcus bringing me coffee in that delicate china cup, I made my own coffee in a sturdy ceramic mug I bought at a pottery class I enrolled in last month. The morning light streams across the desk where I've spread out the paperwork for my latest investment, a small apartment building in Tempe that I purchased after weeks of careful analysis and negotiation. The life insurance money Marcus left me sits in a high-yield savings account earning interest while I decide how to honor his final request. Not because I need his permission anymore, but because I've chosen to transform his guilt into my empowerment. Next month, I start graduate school, pursuing the master's degree in education administration that Marcus convinced me we couldn't afford 23 years ago. The tuition payment I made last week was the most satisfying check I've ever written. Sophia called yesterday to tell me about a financial planning seminar her company is hosting. I thought you might be interested, Mom, she said, her voice carrying a new tone of respect that I'm still getting used to. The speaker is supposed to be really good at explaining investment strategies. That sounds wonderful, I replied, already adding it to my calendar. I'm always interested in learning new approaches. Carmen visits twice a month now, not to check on how I'm managing, but to hear about my latest investments and adventures. Last weekend, she listened with amazement as I described my first solo vacation to New York, where I attended a real estate investment conference and visited museums Marcus had always said were too crowded and expensive. Elena, she said, shaking her head in wonder. You've become someone I barely recognize, but somehow you're more like yourself than you've been in decades. She's right. The woman I am now feels both completely new and deeply familiar, as if I'm remembering someone I used to be before I learned to make myself smaller to fit into Marcus's vision of our life together. The rental properties are thriving under my management. I've raised rents appropriately, improved tenant screening, and even handled a difficult eviction with the help of an attorney I researched and hired myself. The property management company that Marcus used told me last month that our portfolio is one of their most efficiently run investments. Dr. Patricia Wells, the therapist I started seeing in August, helped me understand something profound about forgiveness. You don't have to forgive Marcus for lying to you for 23 years, she said during one of our sessions, but you might consider forgiving yourself for believing him. That forgiveness has been the hardest part of this journey. Not forgiving Marcus for his deception, but forgiving myself for accepting it so completely. For 23 years, I allowed someone else to define my capabilities, to determine what I was smart enough to understand, to decide what information I could handle. But I'm done living in the shadow of someone else's fear. Tonight, I'll fall asleep in the same bed where I once lay awake worrying about finances I wasn't allowed to understand. But now I sleep peacefully, surrounded by investment books instead of ignorance, confident in my ability to build whatever future I choose. That locked drawer didn't just hide money from me. It hid me from myself. But some secrets, once revealed, become the keys to freedom. Marcus may have controlled our marriage, but I control what comes next. And what comes next is entirely up to me. The most dangerous cage is the one you don't realize you're in. But once you find the key, you discover the door was never really locked. You just needed the courage to turn the handle.